And would you still have this criticism if he was a white president?
Oh, absolutely. My criticisms of Bill Clinton when he signed the vicious welfare bill in 1996, when he signed the crime bill, 3 strikes you're out, I was just as critical. I would be just as critical if he were Asian, Latin, Eskimo, or any other ethnicity. See, for me, morality is at the center. It's not a question of the color of one's skin. It's not a question of gender. It's not a question of sexual orientation. It's a question of one's humanity and what kind of choices do you make, and what are the consequences of those choices vis-a-vis those in the biblical text. And I speak as a Christian, talks about the least of these, the 25th chapter of Matthew. I look at the world through the lens of the least of these, of the cross, of those who are marginalized, those who are vulnerable, those who are weak. And when I look at Clarence Thomas, for example, he sides systematically with the strong in his judgments on the Supreme Court. I oppose him. He is beautifully black, just like Barack Obama is beautifully black. But it's a moral standard. It's a question of justice and fairness, and that cuts so much deeper than simply the color of one's skin.
But Hispanics, LGBT rights activists, immigration reform activists have all pretty much set out an agenda and have gone and lobbied the White House. There's been a lot of advocates of President Obama said, you know, look, the blacks just haven't come forward with, look, this is what we want. Do you think that's a fair characterization?
I think it's true that Tavis Smiley and myself and a few others have been highly critical of the president based on principle. And we have been marginalized, if not demonized, because the dominant mood in the black community today is to protect the president and therefore blindly and uncritically support him because of the vicious attacks of the right wing, of Fox News, of deeply conservative fellow citizens in the Republican Party. And so that need to protect the president means you do not put pressure on the president to push through not just interests of black people. This is very important because you see the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer mean very much to me. And Martin Luther King Jr. was never talking just about black interests. He was talking about justice and fairness, and it included black people, but it had to do with brown. It had to do with white and red and yellow and Asian. It's a matter of justice and fairness. And so when we're talking about the black community right now, that black community is in a protective mode. It's not in the mode of pressuring the president, and therefore the president responds to AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby, among conservative Jewish brothers and sisters, many progressive Jewish brothers and sisters critical of that lobby. He responds to the gay and lesbian lobby. He responds to those who put pressure on him.
Well, let me ask you about the racial tightrope, because this is the first black president. He really kind of has to negotiate a racial tightrope, though, doesn't he? I mean, if he swings too far to the left, it'd be pretty difficult for him in some respects. I mean, obviously you'd like him to carry your banner, but it's tough to do, isn't it?
I think it's very difficult to do, but I think it's a matter of being a statesman rather than a garden variety politician. I think, for example, he could have pushed through the public option on the health care system so we wouldn't have the pharmaceutical and insurance companies in the driver's seat. I think he could have used the bully pulpit much better in terms of talking about poor and working people, as opposed to bailing out Wall Street, as opposed to forcing the workers in Detroit, the automobile workers, to renegotiate their contract, cut back on their wages, and restructure the whole wage levels of distribution of resources to workers. So I think, yes, I know he has constraints, and I have an appreciation of him being between a rock and a hard place, but I just think he hasn't stepped to the plate the way he ought. There's a tendency that he has to a punt on second down rather than fourth down.
Well, if he wins re-election, obviously he doesn't have to worry about another election. Do you think he tilts more in your direction? And also, as a follow-up to that, because we're just about out of time, can he still count on your support? Will you go into the polling place and vote for him on Election Day?
Well, I think in terms of relative judgment, you know, the Romney's catastrophe. Obama has been a disaster. Is a disaster better than a catastrophe? Absolutely. What about third-party candidates? My heart is with them. I don't see traction. I don't see viability. I'm locked in too. Relative judgment. Contra Romney, no doubt.
Oh, Professor West, it was a delight talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us here on The Heat.
Thank you so very much. You take good care, Brother Mike.
Thank you.